Good morning, all of you. So, in our mains destinary program, we'll start economy from today onwards. So, I think I am perfectly audible and visible to you. So, if anyone is there, can confirm whether I am audible or not. So, as far as economic syllabus is concerned, I think you must have gone through the syllabus as well as the previous year question paper. If you see that basically those questions which UPSC ask mostly from the, straight from the topic. If you cover the topic thoroughly, you will be able to answer. But point is, thank you, Pulkit. It's audible and visible. So the point is, we need to prepare some first some folder points to how to what to put in our answer. That is your content part. The another one is your answer writing. I think you must be doing that. So let's begin with the first topic, which if you see the syllabus, the first topic is your related the growth development, which and the inclusive growth is there, and resource mobilization issues related to planning. So that first part I will cover in today's discussion. So let me begin with that syllabus only, because we need to see what are the different dimensions we need to cover as far as the topic is concerned, and we will club those topics so that we'll have some interlinking ideas, and we can cover it in a holistic manner. So the first one, if you see the syllabus, the growth, development and employment. So we can club these topic, and in this topic we can cover the first one, inclusive growth. I'm not taking inclusive growth a separate topic. I am including this inside this growth, development and employment one. So inclusive growth, the first one, and issues, inclusive growth and issues arising from it. This is the first one. Second one is under this inclusive growth, we need to see what is inclusive growth. UPSC have asked multiple times, what is this inclusive growth? And then if you see inclusive development also, inclusive development, and then the next one would be your salient features of inclusive growth. So features of inclusive growth, features of inclusive growth, impact of inclusive growth. These are different dimensions. Impact of inclusive growth, impact, and then how can it be achieved? How can it be achieved? How can it be achieved? Then challenges behind this inclusive growth. Challenges also we need to highlight, challenges. And then inequality, obviously. So when we talk about this inclusive growth, we need to separately discuss inequality, because there could be a possibility they may ask you the kind of question, growth and inequality, something we need to highlight what is that inequality. Although not from the prelims point of view, I think tools and techniques how to measure inequality, that you must have already you have been studied. So we'll see some issue based kind of thing under inequality. Then would see this jobless growth, which is again is a concern in our economy. Jobless growth, low generation of employment. Then we'd see the service sector and its contribution in terms of India's growth model. So service sector would be another topic or subtopic you may say. Then another topic which is given in our syllabus, that is your mobilization of resources. Mobilization of resources. Under that, mostly or primarily we'll discuss about the saving rate in the economy and investment. Saving rate in the economy and investment. As you know, investment is the key to economic growth. So we need to first see the saving and then investment. This would be your third subtopic, I would say. And then issues related to planning. Since planning, the 5-year plan, we do not, or we discontinued that, and the commission which deals with that planning, we also discontinued that, but still it's in your syllabus, so need to discuss that. Issues related to planning. The first would be your planning. So broadly we'll see, we'll not discuss the whole 5-year plan one by one. That is something prelims part, you must have gone through that. So we'll see some issue based under this planning, and then this institutions, that is Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. Would see the difference between the two and the kind of work they do, what is the difference between that, why we came with this Niti Aayog. So that also we need to highlight. So this would be your first topic. We try to wind off the whole topic in today's section or today's discussion. So coming to the first one, inclusive growth will gradually move forward. So if you see the inclusive growth, then if you go through the background of it, the history of India's growth story, then you would find this Hindu rate of growth. Hindu rate of growth around till 1980s from independence, and the rate was 3.5%, the Hindu rate of growth. And India has achieved from this a significant change in terms of growth rate from this Hindu rate of growth to now India is growing around 8% on an average. If you see the latest data, then you would find that on an average 8% would be India's growth rate. So from this 3.5 to 8%, you may say there is a significant change in terms of or increase in the growth rate. But according to this, or according to different schools of thought, as per this change in growth rate, the standard of living of the people, that have not changed or increased, or you can say quality of life, that has not been changed significantly. Quality of life or standard of living. If you see, recently Niti Aayog came with for the first time a national multi-dimensional poverty index. I would say, I think you must have gone through this multi-dimensional poverty index. Multi-dimensional poverty index means economic aspect or economic dimension is not the only dimension of the poverty. Behind poverty there will be many dimensions, let's say social dimension, political dimension. That's why this multi-dimensional poverty index. So Niti Aayog for the first time came with this national multi-dimensional poverty index recently, and according to Niti Aayog, 25% of the people are below this poverty line. So a quarter of India's population, they live below poverty line. That was the data which has been given by Niti Aayog recently. So we can highlight this fact in our answer, and we can justify this line that still India has achieved 8% growth rate, but the standard of living or the quality of life that has not been improved significantly. Now question arises, why we could not achieve this standard of living or quality of life of the people, whether India did not give so much importance to it. That's not the right, you'd say, right approach, because if you see the whole history of this planning or 5-year plan, you would find that if you study the objectives of the 5-year plan, then you would find the objectives of the 5-year plans were growth, social justice, equitable distribution. These were the objectives of our 5-year plan, because total 12 5-year plan we have made, and if you see the all those 12 5-year plans, you would find that these are the objectives. That means, in a way, in terms of policy formulation, we have not neglected this aspect, that we have not neglected, like growth we had the objective, social justice we had the objective, or equitable distribution we had this objective. That means we have given importance to improve the life of the people. So inclusive growth is not the new term that we are discussing here, or not, although the explicitly the term was used in the 11th 5-year plan. So it's not that before that we have not given attention to that. So it's not a new thing. So it was there in the objectives of the planning. But point is, why we failed in terms of to achieve this inclusiveness, or to improve this standard of living or the quality of life of the people. Reason was the approach we adopted with respect to that was wrong. The approach we adopted with respect to that was wrong, because the approach what we adopted to make this inclusiveness or to increase the quality of to improve the quality of life of the people. So the approach was trickle down approach. This approach proved to be faulty. I think you know what is the trickle down approach. Idea was the growth will percolate down to the bottom of the society and it will provide equitable distribution. Let me repeat. The growth will percolate down to the bottom stratum of the society and it would provide this equitable distribution. Most of the thinkers or economists, for example, Jagdish Bhagwati, he given so much importance to this. Let's increase the size of the pie of this growth, then it would ensure that initiatives, or it would ensure the investment in the social sector. So our first objective would be to achieve or to increase the size of the GDP or in terms of growth rate, then automatically all those problems in the social sector like education, health and the other such problem, that would be taken care of automatically. This was the idea behind trickle down. So the approach proved to be wrong and we could not achieve as per our expectation. We could not improve the standard of living of the people. So if you I have highlighted what is this trickle down approach. What exactly this Bhagwati, you can highlight in your answer what exactly Bhagwati wanted to say. At the initial level of growth phase, inequality may increase, but that is up to a certain point. But after that, inequality will start declining. So the idea was like this. I think you must have heard about the inverted U-shaped curve, by Kuznets. So let's say up to this point, this is the growth and this is inequality. this is growth and this is inequality. So if you achieve the growth rate at the initial phases, the inequality would increase, but that is up to a certain point, and then inequality would decline or decrease. This was the idea behind this trickle down approach. So they gave emphasis to increase the GDP at the first hand, and then it would automatically percolate down to the bottom sections of the society, and those problems in the social sector would be automatically taken care of. But what exactly went wrong, that we need to highlight. Trickle down achieved one thing, that is growth rate. Trickle down approach achieved one thing, that is growth rate, but the other part that we did not achieve, or we could not increase the standard of life of the people. So why? What was the problem with that approach? The first problem was excessive dependency on primary sector, basically, or you can say agriculture sector, excessive dependency on the primary sector or agricultural sector. If you see the contribution to GDP or the size of the total size of the economy with respect to agricultural sector or primary sector, then it is around 14 to 16%. The contribution of this primary sector in terms of total GDP is around 14 to 16%. If you see the workforce which is dependent on this sector, that is around 55 to 60%. So what we also, from our conventional knowledge, we know that disguised unemployment is a feature of Indian agricultural sector. So 14 to 60% was the contribution to GDP, but around 55 to 60% of the workforce that depend on this. Now coming to the secondary sector, which consists of this manufacturing sector and industries, that contributes around 25 to 27% in terms of GDP, or in the share of the GDP, 25 to 27%. But the employment providing, or the workforce which depend on this secondary sector, that is also around 15 to 20 roughly. It's not much or beyond this percentage of workforce. So 25 to 20% in GDP's contribution, and 15 to 20% in terms of employment contribution or dependency of workforce in the secondary sector. If you see the third sector, which is known as the tertiary sector, or the service sector is the major component of it, then the contribution in GDP of this service sector, it is around 55 to 60%. 55 to 60%, and the employment, the percentage of employment the service sector is providing, that is around 15 to 20%, not more than that. So irony is, the sector which is majorly contributing in terms of GDP, that is providing a less employment opportunity. That is the problem, or you would say the structural problem of Indian economy. The sector which is contributing less in terms of GDP, that sector is providing a major sections this employment opportunity, that is 55 to 60% workforce, they are dependent on this primary sector. So this is the structural problem with the Indian economy, or majorly you could say that this problem with this trickle down approach, why India did not perform well, or India did not achieve the expectation we had from this trickle down theory. Now if you see the ideal model of development of an economy, or you can say an economy which perform a sustainable growth or sustainable growth or sustainable development, you could say, that is the nature is like this. Let me show you through this figure. The ideal development or ideal economy behaves or performs like this manner. At the initial stages of its development, generally it is primary sector who drives the economy, and then the secondary sector, the manufacturing sector we can say, and the third stage it is the tertiary sector which drives the economy. But this did not happen with India. We simply from this primary sector we jumped to service sector or tertiary sector. We simply missed this opportunity to exploit or to explore the secondary sector contribution in terms of GDP and employment opportunity. So we missed this secondary stage. Simply we moved or jumped from this PS or primary sector to service sector. This was another reason why India did not achieve its objective under this trickle down approach. Okay, from this primary sector to tertiary sector we simply moved. So the idea was India for a longer period of time simply dependent on the service sector and neglected this manufacturing sector, and the service sector did not able to generate more employment opportunity for the economy or more employment opportunity from the workforce. Now question arises, why this service sector did like this or performed like this, contributed more in terms of GDP and did not able to absorb more labor force from the market. The first one was in terms of this service sector, the more rise of this BPOs and KPOs, mostly those business processing outsource and knowledge processing outsource, which requires some amount of skill in terms of service sector. Skill. Second, those developed countries, I think this is the model which we saw after this 1990s, that is LPG model. After this liberalization, privatization, globalization, we are evidencing or we saw this kind of trend after that. So second is the developed countries, they outsource the services from our country. The developed countries, they outsource services from our country. That's why we started working on the service sector by neglecting this manufacturing and agricultural sector. And why these developed countries they started outsourcing services from us? Because of this cheap labor. And mostly if you see in the 1990s, this English speaking people and this requirement of management degree was in the greatest importance or was in demand. Third, this manufacturing sector or the secondary sector could not absorb the extra labor force which was there in the primary sector, that is 55 to 60%. So the third point why the service sector or why this missing link you can say, or why this economy is behaving like this, the third one is manufacturing sector could not provide employment opportunity. Fourth, if you see the present era from 2014, we are giving so much of importance to the skill development and all, but before that the skill part was almost neglected and mostly limited to some courses. So lack of formal skill education, was another such problem. lack of formal skill education was another such problem. Why this missing link, or why Indian economy is behaving like this? So these are some of the aspects why Indian economy behaved this manner. From primary sector to we moved simply to service sector or tertiary sector. The first one is this rise of BPOs and KPOs, and the second one is developed countries, they started outsourcing services. The third one is manufacturing sector could not create much employment opportunities, and the last one is lack of formal the skilled education. So due to this only, or due to these problem, the word inclusive growth we gave, or we started giving importance to inclusive growth, and it replaced the word development. It replaced the word development, or we started giving so much emphasis to inclusive growth, or the concept inclusive growth. Okay. So now moving to the next segment, which is the part of this inclusive growth only, elements of inclusive growth. Elements of inclusive growth. The first element, primary sector development or agricultural development. Why we are giving so much emphasis to agricultural development? Because a large sections of the society or large section of workforce, they depend on this agricultural sector. So we need to for this inclusive growth, we need to have or need to develop this agricultural development or development of agricultural sector. Social sector development. Social sector development, that is education, health, skill development. So we need to develop the social sector initiative, drinking water facilities, sanitation, that comes under this social sector. So elements of inclusive growth. Distribution part we need to highlight. Distribution part, distribution of income you may say, or distribution part. Environmental protection. Environmental protection. Environmental protection, as you know, the right to have a clean environment is a fundamental right under Article 21. So environmental protection is another aspect we need to highlight as a part of this inclusive growth. Reduction in regional disparity. Reduction in regional disparity. If you see the regional disparity, then you will get to know that western part of this country is more developed than the eastern part due to colonial factor, because industry that started at the coastal areas, and then also due to this green revolution also we have seen that it was started from this northwestern part of this country. So mostly the eastern part is neglected in terms of this developmental model. So reduction in regional disparity is the another element of inclusive growth. And then industrial development, mostly the manufacturing sector, that need to observe more of employment opportunities, because more of labor force are dependent on this agricultural sector. As we know, these are disguised unemployed, so we need to create more employment opportunity, and we are giving so much emphasis to MSMEs. Government is coming with more of reforms, we will discuss in the industry chapter. So industrial development. Of course, this poverty reduction, because I started my lecture with this data that 25% of India's population under below poverty line as per the Niti Aayog data. So that also we need to highlight and need to work upon, that is poverty reduction, and the last one, this employment generation. Employment generation. So the first element, that is agricultural development, that is primary sector, and the second one is social sector, education, health, etc. And the third one, this distribution aspect, environmental protection, reduction in regional disparity, and then industrial development, specifically the MSME sector, poverty reduction, another aspect, then employment generation. These are the elements of inclusive growth. So first we discussed why this inclusive growth, and then we discussed elements of inclusive growth, and the third aspect we need to highlight impact of inclusive growth. Impact or consequences of inclusive growth. Why we need to give so much importance to inclusive growth? What should be the impact of inclusive growth? The first point, yes, creation of employment opportunity. We need to create that kind of environment so that it can create employment opportunities. Second, yes, the element we in that element section also we have seen that regional disparity. So we need to reduce that regional disparity. If we give importance to, or we work on this inclusive growth, then it will lead to reduction of regional disparity. Skill development or capacity building. Skill development and capacity building. Under that also you can highlight this vocational education. Now you can highlight this new educational policy of 2020. We have given a specific importance to the vocational education. If someone does not want to continue the regular education or this conventional pattern of education, then he may she may drop out and go for this vocational training and education system. And then agro-based industries, that is under this industrial development, because if we give importance to agro-based industries, then and along with that we provide some skill, then those extra labor force or abundant labor force in the agricultural sector, they may shift to the secondary sector so that employment opportunities could be created. So these are some of the impact. First, employment. Second, reduction of regional disparity. The third one is skill development and capacity building, under that vocational training and all. And the fourth one, agro-based industries, or specifically those manufacturing industries in the secondary sector we need to highlight, or we need to develop to create much or create employment opportunity, along with that contribution to GDP. Next segment is how can it be achieved. How can it be achieved? We need to highlight first transportation and communication. Transportation and communication. Example, different highway projects, because infrastructure is the key to economic growth, and through that also we can create employment opportunities. It can boost to the GDP also. So highway projects, railways, etc. So transportation and communication. Second, innovation. If you see the global innovation index of 2021, global innovation index 2021, India has improved its ranking from 132 to 46th place. 46th position as per the Global Innovation Index 2021. It has improved its ranking to 46th. Earlier it was, among 132 economies or 32 countries, its ranking is 46th. Previously it was 48. So we have improved only 2 position, which is a positive sign, or we need to give this promotion to this innovation environment in our country. Third, of course, this poverty reduction. Again, we can highlight that point of Niti Aayog. So we need to emphasize on this poverty reduction. Poverty reduction. Fourth, governance. We need to improve the governance and regulation. Governance. If you see the index which is published by an institution, that is Chandler Good Government Index. Chandler Good Government Index. As per this index, India has been ranked 49th in terms of this government's capabilities or government's performance, which is also known as the good governance. That index we also highlight in terms of this. So governance aspect we need to improve. Social sector, again another factor. Social sector, that is health, education, that also we need to improve. If you see the total health expenditure, and in that total health expenditure, out of pocket expenditure is another concept. I think you must have heard out of pocket expenditure. So this out of pocket expenditure has come down to 48% in 2017 and 18. 48% in 2017 and 18, and in 2013-14 it was around 68%. It was around 68%, and now it's almost 20% reduction in terms of out of pocket expenditure, which is again a good sign. And this data as per the National Health Accounts Estimate. National Health Accounts Estimate. National Health Accounts Estimate, which given this data, that is out of pocket expenditure is now 48% in 17-18. It came down from 68 in 13 and 14. So what needs to be done? For first one is transportation and communication. The second aspect is innovation. We need to give emphasis on that. Third, poverty reduction. Fourth, governance. And then the fifth, social sector initiative in terms of health and education. Let me tell you the objective, which is inclusive growth, that can be achieved if this part, this common part would be your inclusive growth. Then what would be the other three? That is technological aspect, government initiative, and the third one is community engagement. If this common area would be the inclusive growth, then government initiative, let's say whatever we discussed, let's say social sector initiative, your skill development, or let's say the scheme Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, other such social sector initiative, or this better economic participation by different sections of the society, let's say startup and stand-up schemes. So government initiatives must be converged with the technology. Let's say JAM Trinity. I think you must have heard about this. JAM Trinity Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar and mobile number for a smooth transfer of cash subsidy to the accounts of beneficiaries. So technology must be, or let's say Digital India is another. Digital India. So government's initiative must be clubbed with the technology, and the third one is community participation, participation of at the local level. Participation at the local level. Community engagement. Let's say if you see the Panchayat Raj institutions in terms of different projects, corruption is there. So our job is to more of community participation with respect to that, so that corruption could be minimized. If you see the recent initiative to provide tapped water facility to every household, with respect to that also, government has given so much emphasis to this community participation, or the participation of the people at the local level, to provide a better facility or better, or this delivery of the of this particular scheme. So these three could be clubbed to achieve this inclusive growth. One is government initiative, the schemes and other such policies which has been brought by government, and the second one is technology must be included with respect to that, and the third one is community engagement or community participation. Okay, now moving to the challenges with respect to this inclusive growth. Challenges with respect to this inclusive growth, and the first challenge, which from the you'd say from the independence of this country we are suffering, that is poverty. And again we can highlight that the data or the figure given by Niti Aayog, the quarter of India's population are below this poverty line. So we need to work upon that to reduce poverty. So it is a challenge in terms of inclusive growth. Poverty is a separate topic which is given in your GS paper 2 also. So you can have some further point, you can highlight some figure and facts on that. Let me tell you, there is a vicious cycle of poverty. Let me draw that figure so that you can use that in your either in this paper or you can use in your paper 2 also. Vicious cycle of poverty. So in that vicious cycle of poverty, two aspects are there, that is demand side and supply side. Demand side and supply side. In case of demand side, let's say underdevelopment or underdeveloped, in a underdeveloped country, now India has been known as the emerging economy. So for an underdeveloped economy or underdevelopment, due to that low productivity, due to that low productivity, or you can say low income. This is demand side. Due to underdevelopment or underdeveloped economy, low productivity in that economy or low productive capacity of that economy, so lower would be the income. This is the first impact of underdevelopment. Second, since low income, that's why low demand. Low income, that's why low demand. Since low demand, then low investment. Low demand, that's why low investment, because you know when demand increases in the economy, then industries they start producing more or they increase their capacity. So when low investment, again low capital formation. Low capital formation, and when this low capital formation, that lead to underdevelopment again. So it's a cycle. A famous economist is there, Ragnar Narse. He coined this poverty cycle, how an underdeveloped economy continues in that trap or poverty trap, you could say, this vicious cycle of poverty. So it's a demand side. Let's say, let's see under this supply side as well. Again, from this underdevelopment or underdeveloped, due to this underdeveloped or underdevelopment, low productivity in that economy, low productivity in that economy. Since there is low productivity, again low income. Low productivity, low income. So when low income, low saving, since low income, so majority part of this income goes for the consumption, so low saving. When there is low saving in the economy, then low investment. Low saving and then low investment. When there is low investment, again this capital deficiency or low capital formation. Capital deficiency or low capital formation, that leads to again underdevelopment or underdeveloped economy. So it's a vicious cycle, both from the demand side. I have already discussed here. This is supply side, that is from the you can say from the economy side and industry side. If an industry is suffering from this low productivity or economy suffering from low productivity, so that's why the low income. Since low income, majority part of the income goes for the consumption, so low saving, and then if low saving, that leads to low investment. Yes, low capital formation or capital deficiency, again that is underdevelopment. So it's vicious cycle of you can say growth of the economy, or vicious cycle of why this economy suffers from this high poverty and low development. It's a cycle of your low development in the economy. The similar kind of model which is given by Narse, this vicious cycle of poverty, why an individual remains in that poverty trap. Okay, so this you can use in your answer, either in this paper, or you can highlight in some other paper also if any kind of requirement arises. So first problem or first challenges we saw or we discussed under this inclusive growth, that is poverty, and the next one is unemployment. If you see the unemployment rate in our country from the last 3 years, that is quite interesting or quite shocking, if I can say. So let me give that figure to you. The last 3-year data, 2019-20, the unemployment rate was 4.8%, 2018-19, the rate was 5.8%, and 2017 and 18 it was 6.1%. So it's not like due to this pandemic or COVID this unemployment problem is there in our economy. Before that also, due to slowdown in the economy before pandemic, we were suffering from this unemployment problem. 2019-20 the unemployment was 4.8%. This was the year before pandemic, because the lockdown and pandemic which was started in 2020 March. So it was the figure of 2019-20 fiscal year, 4.8 unemployment rate, and 2018-19 it was 5.8%, and in 2017-18 the rate was 6.1%. So this was the unemployment data we need to highlight in our answer. So this was the second, I would say, the challenge behind this inclusive growth. The first we talked about poverty and the underdeveloped economy, which we discussed in our the cycle of underdevelopment, why a country falls in that trap. Now, second unemployment, and the third one is agricultural backwardness. Agricultural backwardness, this is another challenge. Majority sections of the people that depend on the agriculture, that we need to highlight, and a smaller contribution in terms of GDP, we have already discussed. Still, India is struggling with this 4% to achieve a consistent 4% growth rate in terms of agriculture, and we are working on this doubling of farmers' income. Doubling of farmers' income, and this agricultural backwardness was another challenge. The next challenge is social sector. The next challenge, social sector initiative. If you see the global hunger index of 2021, global hunger index 2021, India's position is 101. India's position is 101, and if you compare with the 2020 global hunger index, India's position was 94. That means you can imagine the situation of global hunger index in our country. So 2021 the rank was 101, in 2020 the rank was 94, And as per this 2021, India is behind its neighbor countries, that is Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. These countries are ahead of India's hunger problem. Okay. So these are some of the challenges behind or to achieve this inclusive growth: poverty, unemployment, agricultural backwardness, social sector initiative. You can add other such dimensions also, let's say industries, social aspect also we can highlight, those rigid caste system, this diversion in our society, this in terms of the social aspect and all. So that also, let's say this political factor also we can add. So there are multiple dimensions you can add to your answer to highlight that what are the challenges behind this inclusive growth, although we discussed some of the economic dimensions under this. Okay. So now moving to another section of this the today's discussion, that is problem of unemployment. Problem of unemployment we need to see. If we talk about this problem of unemployment, then this term comes to our mind, that is jobless growth, because growth is there, what we discussed earlier, that from 3.5, that is Hindu rate growth, to we achieved this 8% growth rate. But that growth is not sufficient, or that growth is not able to create adequate amount of employment opportunity. That's why majority section of the workforce, they are out of this job, or they are not getting this employment opportunities. That is the problem of our economy. So let's discuss about that jobless growth. A private institution, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, this private institute came with one report, and this report says the rate of unemployment in India varies on an average the 6 to 8%. 6 to 8% unemployment rate. That means the 6 to 8% people, they are not able to get the employment while they want to get that. So rate of unemployment is 6 to 8%. And if you compare the 5 years ago, then it was around 5%. It was around 5%. That means the rate of unemployment has increased to on an average 6 to 8%, but 5 years ago it was 5%. Somehow the unemployment rate has increased in our economy as per the report of the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, a private institution. If you see the fiscal year of 2021, or the last fiscal year 2021, in this fiscal year the GDP growth was 8.7%. The GDP growth was 8.7%, while the employment growth was 3.7%. This is quite interesting. If you see the last fiscal year 2021, the growth rate was 8.7%, but the employment growth, that was 3.7%. That's why we are so much of concerned about this. Let me give you another figure to support my argument why that is India is suffering from this jobless growth. If you see 2010 to 20, the decade, the last decade we can say, the number of working women in India, that has been significantly dropped and dropped to 19% from 26%. Earlier it was 26% and now it is 19% in this decade. And this data has been given by what or which institute? World Bank. This data has been given by World Bank that women participation or women as a part of this workforce has been dropped to 19% from the 26% in this 2010 to 20 decade. Now, I think we have given enough substance or enough proof that India is suffering from this problem of unemployment and specifically this jobless growth, because India is now achieved or is able to achieve, let's say, 8% growth rate on an average. Reasons behind this unemployment problem. Reasons behind this unemployment problem. The first problem which we need to highlight, that is India's system of education, which is not adequate to provide employment opportunities. So, education system and job training. Education system and job training which is not enough to provide employment opportunities to youths. Again, another shocking fact, let me tell you, to 2017 economic survey, if you see economic survey of 2017, you will find a figure that is over 30% of youth. 30% of youth in India are, a term has been used, NEET, N-E-E-T or N-E-E-T, that is not in education, not in education, not in employment or training. Not in education, not in employment or not in training. So 30% of youth, they are neither of these three, I mean education, employment or training. So you can imagine what would be the situation of India's this 30% of youth. So this is as per the economic survey 2017 only, government data. Economic survey 2017, 30% youth, they belong to this NEET category, not in education, not in employment and not in training. Another figure, let me tell you, why we are saying education and job training is not supporting this job market, or this education system in our India is not adequate to get a person job in the job market. If you see the UNICEF report of 2019, UNICEF report of 2019, this UNICEF report 2019 says that at least 47% of Indian youth are not on track to have education or skill which is necessary for the employment till or in 2030. So the kind of job which will be created in 2030, or the kind of employment or job which would be created in 2030, this 47% of Indian youth would not be fitted or would not getting education or skill part with respect to fit in that job market which would be created in 2030. So that means if this 47% are not getting that you'd say that level of education or training to be fit in the job market, then this 47% obviously would be out of this job market or out from this job market, or they would not get any kind of employment opportunity. So this is the enough evidence to support our argument why or how this education system in our country is faulty, faulty education and job training process. Okay, so this was the first we highlighted. The second, again the same thing, we can highlight the share of service sector, although higher in terms of GDP, but not getting or not creating employment opportunities or enough employment generation. That is another. Third, again we can highlight the same manufacturing sector, although it's contributing around 25 to 27%, more or less it's also not creating adequate employment opportunities or not creating jobs to absorb the extra labor force from the agricultural sector, because in agricultural sector mostly are unskilled laborers. So if you want to shift this extra labor force from the primary to either manufacturing or service, you need to have skill development or you need to give this skill training. Now, the factor which mostly affected this manufacturing sector, why this manufacturing sector is not creating enough job, one aspect is what we discussed, that is skill. The second is labor rigidities. Labor rigidities or rigid labor laws. Recently, India has come up with, or government of India has come up with these 4 labor codes. Earlier it was 29 labor codes. So by merging and by amending those labor laws, now we have come up with this 4 codes only. One of the aspect of this labor reform, why we need that labor reform, because this labor reform facilitates what? Ease of doing business. If you see the ease of doing business component, then rigid labor is another factor which hinder this manufacturing sector to create jobs. Okay, so first, faulty education system or problem in the education system. You can highlight in that education system also that we are giving so much focus on this higher education part. We are simply neglecting this basic education system, basic skilling at the school level or at an intermediate level. That also you can write under that. First point. Second point, again this service sector. Third, manufacturing sector. And under that manufacturing sector, why this manufacturing sector is not creating adequate jobs? The first one is labor rigidities, and the second one is lack of skill, what we have already discussed, lack of skill and labor rigidities. And what is the requirement of this labor reform? Requirement is to bring reform in terms of labor code or labor laws, so that it would provide a business friendly environment, so that it would be easier for the employer to hire more and more people. The last point which we need to highlight, that is infrastructure bottlenecks. I think it's a common point. Infrastructure bottlenecks, it's a common point you can highlight. Okay. So these are some of the like factors behind this jobless growth. Why India is not able to provide adequate jobs while achieving a growth rate of 8% or on an average these days. So solution, let's discuss that, or how we can achieve that or we can remove, or we can create employment opportunity along with this growth rate. So first one, labor reform. Obviously you can highlight that. Now we have come up with this 4 labor codes to facilitate this ease of doing business. Second, more creation of labor intensive jobs. More creation of labor intensive jobs, let's say MSME sector, which is based on this labor only. Let's say textile, leather industries. These industries, they more dependent on the labor force than the capital. So we need to provide more focus on the labor intensive industries, so that more of labor requirement or more labor could be absorbed in that industries. So labor intensive jobs or MSME sectors. Third, revival of manufacturing sector. Revival of manufacturing sector. Fourth, skill development, obviously. Skill development. And fifth, investment in human capital. Investment in human capital or human development. We need to have a good education system. We need to have a good training facilities, so that make them eligible for the job market. That should be our motto. Time and again, I think be it inclusive growth, be it jobless growth, we are discussing about the secondary sector, which did not, or which is more or less stagnant and did not perform well in terms of absorption of labor force. So let's begin with this, why this manufacturing sector is facing so much a problem, or why this manufacturing sector or what kind of issues are there in this manufacturing sector, secondary sector in a broad manner. The first one, the first problem, that the economy is, the growth of the economy, that is driven by knowledge intensive rather than labor intensive. The economy or the growth of the economy more on the knowledge intensive, just I have already told you, knowledge processing industries rather than the labor intensive. That's why more of labor force could not be observed in the manufacturing sector, or manufacturing sector did not create enough job opportunities. Second, automation in manufacturing sector could be another factor why more of labor force could not be absorbed in that sector. Automation and this replacing labor. So it's a challenge for the manufacturing sector. In years to come, we will see more of automation in this particular sector, manufacturing sector. Poor ranking of India in terms of ease of business. So India should create a business friendly environment. So low ranking in the ease of doing business or ease of business in the country, again it's a kind of disincentive for the investors all over the world. Land acquisition, another problem. Land acquisition leads to a litigation with respect to this activism and all. That's why land acquisition is a lengthy process, in fact, so which discourages investors. Yes, labor laws or stringent labor laws, weak infrastructure, So these are some of the factors which led to this manufacturing sector is not growing as per the expectation or not creating job as per the expectation. So the first one, knowledge intensive economy is more driven by this knowledge intensive rather than labor intensive, or simply we can highlight that labor intensive industries are not we are not giving so much of emphasis to those labor intensive because many factors, this is scaling and all. So textile and leather industries I have given example. Through that also we can create more of job opportunities. Then automation is another factor which may lead to more of labor displacement, and this poor ranking in terms of business. Land acquisition is another problem. Labor laws or rigid labor laws is another such problem. A recent trend, let me highlight for you in terms of manufacturing sector. If you see the manufacturing sector in these days, contract labor, contract jobs or contract labor force, you will find more now in manufacturing sector. That means more of contract labor than those, let's say those fixed salaried or fixed term labor. So now this manufacturing sectors are hiring more of these contract laborers than the fixed salaried or fixed paid laborers. And why this? And why this contract labor, the number of contract labor is increasing in the manufacturing sector? Because for the two factors, the one is, yes, rigid labor laws, so it's easy to fire, easy to hire. That's why this contract labor force is increasing in the manufacturing sector. This is the one factor. The second factor, the wage rate. The wage rate is generally less than this fixed term employment or this in case of contractual labor, they generally get lesser wage rate than this regular employment or regular job. That's why a new trend is emerging in the manufacturing sector, a secondary sector. The first one, that is new trend is contract labor force. Why? Due to this rigid labor laws. And the second one is this wage rate is generally less. Okay. So let me tell you broadly factors behind unemployment. What are the causes behind unemployment or factors behind unemployment, or you can say the traditional factors which contributes to unemployment in India. So let's discuss that. The first one, these are the generic factors or generic causes behind this unemployment. The first one, disguised unemployment in agricultural sector. Disguised unemployment in agricultural sector. Second one is less focus in labor intensive industries, let's say textile, leather industries, etc. Less focus on the labor intensive industries. Third, economic slowdown. You can give reasons behind this COVID pandemic, economic slowdown, and then inadequate growth in terms of infrastructure, because infrastructure also creates employment opportunities, or lesser investment in infrastructure as well as the manufacturing sector also. Okay. Fifth, regressive social norms, let's say society or social norms which do not allow women to participate in the labor force. So regressive social norms. Population growth is another traditional factor behind unemployment. Yes, skill, lack of vocational skill training, which is does not allow to participate in the labor force. So these are some of the factors behind this unemployment situation in our country. Unemployment situation in our country. The new segment again rising, or a new segment, or you could say a new trend which we generally see in our economy, that is gig economy. As you know that we have divided our this whole workforce or whole this economy into two parts, organized and unorganized. On this unorganized sector, this gig economy is coming, and gig economy is something different from this regular employment pattern. It's not like a fixed kind of thing, 9 to 6. It's a temporary kind of thing, or temporary positions, or which we also use the term freelancing kind of thing. According to 2019 report, and the name of the report was India Staffing Federation. India Staffing Federation. As per this report, India Staffing Federation in 2019, the year which it was published, India is the 5th largest in flexi staffing globally. 5th largest. That means in terms of this flexible employment opportunities, India has secured the 5th position after US, China and Japan and Brazil. US, China, Japan and Brazil. After that, India has got the 5th position. And one of the key component of this gig economy is that around 56% of employment opportunity this economy has created, or new employment opportunity it has created, 56%. And this gig economy, as we see in our day-to-day life, like this delivery executive of Swiggy and Zomato, those e-commerce, like your other such e-commerce institutions or e-commerce organizations. Apart from this blue collar job, this gig economy also create this white collar job also. It's not that only gig economy is creating blue collar job, it is also creating some white collar job, like any kind of project specific consultants, any particular expert in that particular field, they also hired by these companies, e-commerce companies, let's say web designer and all those content writers, I think you must have seen. So they are also hired by these companies. Now question arises, why this gig economy has got a push in terms of these days. So let's discuss one by one. The first one is flexibility. flexibility, that means no place to work from home you can do, there is no specific place, you can work from anywhere, so that flexibility it is giving. Second one is your time flexibility also. It's not that you have to work for 9 to 6 for other time also, like as per your choice you can work for the company and you can earn money. So this flexibility is giving, that's why the nature of employment opportunity that has been changed recently. Changing attitude among the youths, or changing attitude with respect to employment or employees, like no one wants to work under any kind of what you call a pressure kind of environment or any under any boss. So the freelancing attitude or freelancing work has these days has increased. So the changing attitude with respect to employees also favoring this gig economy. Third, business model. Business model means mostly this business model referring to contractual labor rather than this fixed paid laborers, because fixed paid laborers demand generally a higher amount. So contract laborers or contractual laborers, they can work for a or at a lesser amount. So that business model also supports this kind of economy. Startup culture also, at the initial phases of the company they cannot afford those fixed term employment or fixed term employees because it incurs a high amount of cost. That's why they prefer this gig kind of economy, and that's why this economy is emerging these days. So if you see this gig economy, it is coming under this mostly or majorly under this unorganized sector, and the existing legislation in terms of code on wages, Code on Wages 2019 is also applicable to this gig economy, because Code on Wages 2019 decides a floor wage rate or minimum wage rate. So this gig economy is also applicable to this or comes under this. So minimum wage rate. So we can say that existing legislation is also applicable to gig economy, or it also includes gig economy. Code on Social Security 2020. Code on Social Security 2020. This code recognized this gig economy as a separate kind of a new occupational category in the year 2020. So it gives the definition of it, and it also ensures the social security for these laborers or those workers which are working on that. So it's not that legislation is not there for this gig economy. These two legislations are there, existing legislations are there, also applicable in case of gig economy. So gig economy was asked in GS paper 1 with respect to women empowerment. So there could be a possibility they can ask in this paper because it's a part of economy as well. So you can expect a question. So some broad fodder points you must have if any question comes, so that you can highlight. So the contribution to this economy with respect to this gig economy, the nature of employment it creates. So it creates new job to the job market or adding new jobs to the job market. Second one is it providing income opportunity for those semi-skilled laborers, those who are not skilled with respect to anyone. Let's say those delivery executives and their other such part, they are not so much of skilled, still they are earning a decent amount for the survival and all. So that we need to, or we can highlight in our answer. Okay, so now we are moving to the next segment of our discussion, that is resource mobilization, and we already highlighted this inclusive growth and different dimensions of inclusive growth. Then we discussed the employment, unemployment, that is jobless growth also we highlighted, gig economy we'll highlight it, and now we are moving to the next segment, that is resource mobilization, and under that we will see the saving and investment part. Saving and investment part, first let's discuss this investment. Let me give you some facts so that we can start our discussion from there only. Investment in our economy from the last one decade, the investment has declined. The investment has declined from last one decade. If you see the statistics, then you will find that in 2011-21, sorry, 2011-12, the rate of investment was 34.3% of GDP. 2011-12, the investment rate was 34.3% of GDP. If you see the figure of 2020 and 21, 2020-21, 27.1%. This is the rate of investment. 2011-12, the rate of investment is 34.3%, and 2020-21, the rate of investment is 27.1%. That means simply the argument which I started from beginning of this topic, that is investment has declined, the statistics says that also. Now question arises, why this investment has declined? What exactly the impact on the economy if investment in our economy declines? I think you must have heard a concept while you prepare for the prelims, that is ICOR, incremental capital output ratio. The use or utility of this ICOR is, higher the ICOR, let me repeat, higher the ICOR, less efficient the use of capital. So this is the nature of the economy. Why this low investment? Because high amount of ICOR in our country. What is the meaning of this high amount of ICOR? Higher the ICOR, less efficient the use of capital in our economy. And India is suffering from high ICOR. India is suffering from high ICOR, incremental capital output ratio. Okay, that means if you see the trend of last 5 years, then ICOR increased from 3.8% of GDP in the year 2016 and 17 to 4.9 in 2018-19 to 6.9, 3.8 2016-17, 4.9 2018-19. It further deteriorated 6.9 in 2019-20. This was the level of ICOR. That means ICOR is increasing year after year in our country. So increasing ICAR signifies that we are using our capital with lesser efficiency, which gives a low productivity. That means low investment in our economy. Reasons behind this low ICAR or lesser investment in our country. Reasons. If you see the investment, conventional theory says two types of investment. One is your autonomous investment, which is also known as the government investment. Autonomous investment, which is also known as the government investment, or induced investment, or also known as this private investment. Two types of investment: autonomous, that is government investment; induced investment, or also known as the private investment. And we know that government investment is not adequate, or those industries, those private industries, they need a private investment to supplement the government investment to drive this economy or to achieve a targeted growth rate in our economy. So if you see the private investment, what exactly or what are the factors on which this private investment is dependent? The first factor on which this private investment is dependent upon macroeconomic stability. The first one, or the first factor, macroeconomic stability. Second, high amount of household saving. High amount of household saving. Productivity in the economy. Productivity in the economy. Access to credit. They depend on access to credit. Access to credit, then resolution of NPA system or non-performing assets in banks, and then clearing of balance sheets. Clearing of balance sheets, that means balance sheet with the companies. So private investment depends on stability of the economy or macroeconomic stability. The second one is your household saving or rise in household saving. The third one is productivity must be increasing in the economy. And the fourth one is the credit facility or easy credit facilities in the economy, and then resolution of NPA problem in the economy and clearing of balance sheet of the different companies. So these are some of the factors which you can say encourages private investment in the economy. But unfortunately, private investment is not up to the mark as per the expectation. Now question arises, why private investment is less? And if you see the trend that private investment in our economy is continuously declining. If you see, let me give you one statistics to support my argument. If you see the July bulletin of RBI or Reserve Bank of India, it says that the fiscal stimulus which was given by government, fiscal stimulus which is given by government under Atmanirbhar Bharat 2.0 and 3.0 schemes will likely accelerate public investment. That means with this statement, RBI is assuming this fact that private investment is not adequate to support or to drive this economy. That's why public investment will boost the confidence of the private investment, so that it will accelerate the private investment which remains sluggish, still low capacity utilization. So which was already at a very low rate, that will accelerate with respect to increase in private public investment under this Atmanirbhar 2.0 or 3.0. Now question arises, that means private investment already are they at a lower pace or lower phase, which we expect that as per the increase in public investment, it will encourage the economic sentiments and will increase the private investment. Now COVID is one such factor, or from this 2020 onwards we have seen this pandemic, we have seen this lockdown, we have seen this breakdown of supply chain management, we have seen this due to this lockdown only, this reverse labor migration to their home states. So there are a number of such factors which discourages this private investment. So private investment declined steadily or continuously in our economy. Apart from this factor which we can highlight in our answer, till or this from this March 2020 onwards, or when this pandemic started, we can highlight those factors like lockdown and supply chain disruption, this reverse migration of labor force. So that we also highlight. Apart from that, those we can say these are some of the temporary factors we can highlight. Due to the pandemic only this is happening, but apart from that there are some other factors which Indian economy in general is suffering, which discouraging this private investment, that we need to highlight. So the first point or the first factor which India is facing a problem, that's why this private investment is very low in our economy, that is, I have already highlighted, that is land acquisition problem. Land acquisition problem. If you see the time or the duration is taking with respect to land acquisition, this is another factor which discourages private investment. Second, this delayed and cumbersome environmental clearance, delayed process with respect to delayed and cumbersome environmental clearance. Environmental clearance. Third, problem with respect to infrastructural front. Problem with respect to infrastructural fund. Although many of these problems we are trying to address, or government is trying to address, but still India is facing, let's say, infrastructural bottlenecks, or in terms of energy requirement. So these are still prevailing in our economy, which again discouraging this private investment, which we need to work upon, that is infrastructure, energy requirement. On these front also India needs to work so that private investment can be accelerated. Apart from these factor, another major factor which contributes to this low investment in our economy, that is the rate of saving. So let's come to the saving part. The rate of or low rate of saving also we can see. Saving depends on, if you see or if you divide the whole saving of the economy, then we can say saving by households, saving by private corporate sector, saving by households, saving by private corporate sector, saving by public sector also. These three components or these three sectors combined the total saving of the economy: household, private corporate sector, and then public sector. If you see individual contribution of these three sectors in terms of total saving of the economy, then household contributes almost around 60% in terms of total country's saving. 60% or majority comes from this household only. Now, if you see the saving rate, let me highlight one data for you, and it has been published by Central Statistical Office. In 2012, the comparison has been given. In 2012, the saving rate was 34.6%. 34.6%, and in 2019 it was 30%, and this figure has been given by CSO before pandemic started in 2020. So household saving simply reduced from 34.6% to 30%. That means the saving rate has declined. When saving rate has declined, obviously this investment in the economy would decline. So one of the major factor of this low investment rate in our economy, that is low saving rate as well. Low saving rate. Now question arises, why this low saving rate? And if you see this reduction of saving rate, then household, again the household saving rate has declined significantly. Household saving rate has declined significantly. If household saving has declined significantly, to achieve your targeted growth rate, then companies are not getting fund from the economy or inside the economy. They would depend on the outside borrowing. When they start borrowing to meet their requirement, then definitely that will lead to current account deficit. So if you see, before COVID time, 2020 March was the COVID time, the pandemic started. Before that, economic slowdown was there. And why this economic slowdown? Due to this lower in saving rate. Mostly or majorly the household section, they were saving less. And I think you must have heard about this Harrod-Domar model of development. This Harrod-Domar model of development also says the same thing, that saving is crucial to increase the investment in the economy, is a major determining factor in terms of economic growth. So if saving rate is less, then that would lead to lesser economic growth by the decline in the investment. Okay. Now question arises, why this household saving was less? One of the major factor behind this lesser household saving, because this you can say that majority of the most of the income or major part of the income that goes for the consumption. Major part that goes for the consumption, because what we know, income minus consumption, that is your saving. Income minus consumption, that is your saving. So a majority part if goes for the consumption, the saving definitely comes down. So this is one aspect. And why majority part is going for the consumption, that is the price level is at a higher side. Price level is at a higher side. Price level is at a higher side. The second factor which contributed a higher rate of consumption and lesser saving, that is you can say this demographic dividend, or since more youth population are there in our total basket of population or total bracket of population, majority are youth, their consumption pattern is something which increases the consumption or less towards the saving. So the consumption pattern of youth, that is more towards the consumption or the consumption behavior of youths, that is more towards the consumption, less towards the saving. That is another factor behind this lesser saving rate in our economy with respect to the household. That's why lower investment in our economy. Okay, so these are the this under this resource mobilization we have discussed this investment and this saving with respect to our economy. What was the rate of saving, what was the rate of investment. Okay, so now this part is over. Now I am moving to the next part. I have already given the dimensions or subtopics we will discuss in our class. We discussed this inclusive growth, we discussed the different dimensions of it, we discussed unemployment and employment, and we discussed jobless growth also. Then we specifically highlight this gig economy. We discussed then the manufacturing sector, why this manufacturing sector is again performing less. We will see some more points of with respect to manufacturing sector when we will discuss the industry part. But as far as this is concerned, we can write a decent answer with respect to by highlighting these factors. Then we discuss this resource mobilization also, saving and investment also we highlighted. Now I am moving to the next part, that is inequality. I will not highlight those concepts related to inequality or those measurements, how inequality is measured. Would highlight one issue which the last economic survey had covered, and in that economic survey a chapter was dedicated to with respect to this growth, inequality and poverty. This three you can say this trinity you can make: growth, inequality, poverty. The objective of that chapter was what should be our priority. Priority would be the inequality or priority would be the poverty. This was, or this has been highlighted in the last year survey. The question may ask opinion based question: do you think inequality would be our priority before poverty, or poverty would be our priority before inequality? We can highlight this opinion of economic survey, because generally economic survey's opinion is considered as the opinion of the government. So we need to discuss that. So economic survey 2021, economic survey 21, it argues that perfect outcome equality may not be desirous. Perfect outcome equality may not be required, or perfect outcome equality should not be our priority. This was the argument given by economic survey 2021. Now why this economic survey highlighted this fact that this perfect equality is not required? Because it argued on this line, this step towards equality, or this kind of step towards equality, can reduce individuals' incentive for work. It would be a disincentive for innovation. It would be discouragement for wealth creation. So this perfect outcome of equality should not be our policy priority, because it would disincentivize or discourage this incentive for work, innovation and your wealth creation. So, what should be our priority? The priority should be, in India, the expansion of overall pie, expansion of the whole GDP is preferable. Expansion of whole GDP is preferable, or the size of the economy would be preferable. That should be expanded first. Then what would be the result? What would happen? It says redistribution, which again this part of this equality, that would be possible if we increase the size of the pie. So, first is, it is not equality. What it suggests, increase the size of GDP so that we can do this redistribution. If the size of the GDP increases, so redistribution is feasible only if the size of GDP is increased. So, our first job is to increase the size of GDP. This was the first argument. Again, it says that removal of poverty, that means absolute poverty. That means, let us say Niti Aayog said the quarter of population below this poverty line, or 25% of our population below poverty line, then our motto or our objective should to reduce the number of this rate of poverty. So, absolute poverty should be our priority with respect to policy making, or should be our greater concern than the relative poverty, which is also known as equality. This is the argument of economic survey, that poverty should be our priority than the inequality. Now, what kind of evidence does that this economic survey suggests that poverty should be our priority? It says that if you see the growth of different states in our country, then you will find that the states with higher per capita, or the states which is growing at a greater pace or GDP at a very higher rate, these states are performing with respect to poverty very well. These states are performing with respect to reduction of poverty very well. So, objective would be to increase the size of GDP so that poverty could be reduced, and that is absolute poverty. Again, a study by World Bank, it was in 2000. Study by World Bank, it was in 2000, and this World Bank study highlights this fact that from 1970s to 1990s, when India came out from this Hindu rate of growth to higher rate of growth, then poverty has declined significantly. Poverty has declined significantly. This was the argument of economic survey by highlighting this World Bank's you'd say report. Okay. So, if any kind of question comes to asked by UPSC that what should be our policy priority, it would be poverty or inequality, then our argument must be we should focus on the growth to reduce this absolute poverty first, and then redistribution would automatically happen. With the increase in size of GDP, redistribution would be made properly. So, poverty would be our first priority, and we can highlight this fact that the higher per capita states, they are performing better in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of World Bank study also. India could achieve a sustained decline in poverty during 70s, 90s only when this growth rate peaked from 3.5% to higher than that. So, growth rate we need to sustain, or higher growth rate we need to sustain to reduce the poverty. So, this was about this growth inequality poverty relation. Okay. Now, moving to the last part of today's discussion, that is planning per se, because planning is there in our syllabus, planning issues arising out of it. So, planning, then institutional, also we will discuss planning commission and Niti Aayog. So, let us start with the planning first. First, objectives of planning. If you see the objectives of planning, then there are multiple objectives. If you see the total 12 5-year plans, one is economic growth, because economic growth was required, what we studied at the initial phases of our discussion, trickle down approach, we need growth. So, economic growth was the first priority of planning. Then self-reliance was another such objective of planning, self-reliance, because at the time of independence we started importing from other countries, including food grains. So, we gave emphasis on this self-reliance. Then full employment was another objective, because poverty can be removed or reduced if we provide more employment opportunities. So, full employment was another significant purpose or objective of the planning. After that, also we gave emphasis to reduction of inequality, social justice. We also gave emphasis social justice, and modernization process. So, these are some of the objectives of planning. So, let us see assessment of planning. History and all I would not discuss with you, because I think you have already studied that. Assessment, we can expect question on that. Assessment. With respect to assessment, we will first see the achievements. Achievements first. Achievement first, higher growth rate. It was planning which resulted into this higher growth rate, and now we are growing this 8% on an average in this 21st century. So, higher growth rate. Once the growth rate was 3.5%, those Hindu growth rate, and now it is 8% growth rate. So, higher growth rate, one such achievement of 5-year plan. Infrastructure development, or increase in growth of infrastructure. This is another objective of 5-year plan or planning. So, first higher growth rate and then infrastructure. Third, industries, or specifically that capital goods industries. Capital goods industries. I think you must have heard this Mahalanobis model of development. Or the initial phases of our planning, we gave importance to capital goods industries, so that we can manufacture some basic goods or consumer goods through this capital goods. So, capital goods industries we started. like iron industries, steel industries. Through that we can produce some consumer goods also. So capital industries we started to encourage or started to set up. Self-reliance. Through this we achieved the self-reliance also. In terms of food, this green revolution we brought. In terms of goods, capital goods industries we started. Electricity generation, or we started this consumer goods through this capital goods. So kind of self-reliance we achieved through this planning. Fifth, rise in domestic saving rate. Rise in domestic saving rate. If you see the saving rate of our economy, then almost 9% in 1950s, 9% in 1950s, or 50-51 you can say, and it increased to around 40%, not 40% exactly, it's around 30%, or you can write on an average 25 to 30%, let's say, in 2000. 25-30%. In fact, we achieved 35% in terms of saving rate in the last decade. So this was the achievement of planning. So first achievement, higher growth rate. Second, infrastructural growth. Third, industries in terms of capital goods. Fourth, self-reliance. Fifth, increase in domestic saving rate. Now, the failure or criticism. Failure. Although we achieved from this 3.5 to 8% growth rate, but if you see the targeted growth rate of each or individual 5-year plans, then you will find that it barely we achieved that target. So the targeted growth rate we did not achieve through this planning process. Only first and sixth 5-year plan we achieved that targeted. Apart from these two, the actual growth rate is something smaller than this target. So this actual growth rate, which was smaller or less than the targeted one, actual was smaller or less than the targeted one, except this first and sixth 5-year plan. So majorly it failed to achieve the targeted growth rate. Since we did not achieve this targeted growth rate, we did not achieve those other goals also which was associated with the growth rate. For example, poverty, improve the quality of life of the people. So these target also we could not achieve because we did not achieve the targeted growth rate. This was the first problem or first criticism against the planning. Second, economic inequality. Economic inequality. Now, I think you must have seen the report of this Oxfam Institute, which publishes a report on inequality, that 1% holds more than the 4 times of resources which is 4 times of wealth that this 70% of the people holds. That means the 1% of the population, they acquires 4 times resources more than the wealth with the 70% of the population. That is the level of inequality which we can see. This was the first criticism against this inequality. Second, this approach which we have already discussed, trickle down approach, that did not work to remove this inequality. So inequality started rising with the increase in growth rate, but as per the expectation, it did not execute or did not happen. Third, unemployment. We have already discussed unemployment. Unemployment. Poverty. Although increase in the growth rate, poverty also declined, but still if you measure, then again we can highlight this Niti Aayog report, a quarter of population is below poverty line. Limited success with respect to poverty. Or we can say it's not as per the expectation. If you see the statistics, then in 1950s, 60% of population was below poverty line. If you see the figure of 1993-94, 45% was below poverty line. And in 2011 and 12, it was around 22% below poverty line. So it's not that effective with respect to reduction of poverty. Agricultural sector, we have seen negligency or neglect of agriculture. First 5-year plan, we gave emphasis to agriculture. Then simply we shifted to industries from the next 5-year plan onwards. So except the first 5-year plan, we have never given so much emphasis to agriculture, where a majority sections of workforce depend on their livelihood. That is again irony of this planning. Of course, regional disparity. Regional disparity. Mostly the western states and northwestern states, they were developed. Eastern states and northeastern states were neglected in this developmental model. That's why you would find this red corridor, mostly red corridor in this underdeveloped areas. So these are some of the drawbacks, or you can say the failure of the planning as a process or planning as a system. The first failure, actual growth was less than the targeted one, except these 2 5-year plan, first and sixth. Poverty also, we could not with respect to poverty. That's why since the lesser growth, so we could not work or achieve the target with respect to poverty reduction or improve the quality of life of the people. Then economic inequality was also prevailing. Unemployment was there. Poverty, again, we saw this figure that 1950s, it was 60%, 1993-94, 45% was the rate of poverty, 11, 12, 22%. So very slow pace reduction in terms of poverty. Agricultural sector was neglected. Apart from or except this first 5-year plan, no such other plan gave so much emphasis to the agricultural sector. And then the regional disparity, obviously the developmental model which we follow, it gave emphasis to western and northwestern region. The whole eastern and northeastern part were neglected. So these are some of the failure or drawback, you can say, of this planning as a system. Now we are moving to the at the institutional level, why this planning commission was we simply discontinued and we came with this new Niti Aayog. Simply we have to highlight what are the difference with respect to the functioning or the you can say the principal difference or difference in terms of functions of these two institutions. First, cooperative federalism. First, cooperative federalism. Let's see what is this. If you see the functioning of Niti Aayog, Niti Aayog has regularly constituted different committees of which we generally those state chief minister, they head that committees. And in terms of planning process, although we have discontinued this 5-year plan as such, but any plan which is made by Niti Aayog or any kind of you'd say strategy discussion, then all those state ministers, they also involve in that. All those state chief ministers are representative of states, they also involve or participate in that discussion or this strategical preparation, which promotes what? Cooperative federalism, and we can say this participatory approach with respect to Niti Aayog, which was absent in case of Planning Commission, as you know from the function. Planning Commission was the only such body which formulates, which executes, which does everything. There was a very less voice of states in terms of this plan or any formulation or any strategy formulation. So this is one such difference between the two. It promotes cooperative federalism, or Niti Aayog promotes cooperative federalism. The second one is competitive federalism. Competitive federalism. If you see the functioning of these two, then Niti Aayog promotes this competitive federalism. Niti Aayog comes up with different indices, let's say Sustainable Development Index, and through that different states, how they are performing with respect to different social sector initiatives or social indicators, that creates the spirit of competitiveness. It generally provides the ranking or the states which performs well with respect to education, the states which perform well with respect to health, in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of inequality, in terms of sanitation with respect to Swachh Bharat. So this indices promotes this competitive atmosphere among the states, so that the states work on this competitive front to deliver those services to at the ground level. This is again one difference between planning and Niti Aayog. It was absent in case of Planning Commission. Monitoring, although Planning Commission was known for monitoring but not that effective, although it had that system or in the structural form, but this in terms of effective monitoring approach, Planning Commission was severely failed. But Niti Aayog is doing or it effectively or monitoring the progress of every scheme with a proper manner. So again, in terms of monitoring, Niti Aayog is in advantageous position, or Niti Aayog is in as the upper hand with respect to Planning Commission. That's why we are with the Niti Aayog, or Niti Aayog is doing that. So if we see the difference between these three, difference between these two, then the three principles or broad principles on which we can say Niti Aayog is different from Planning Commission with respect to your cooperative federalism and then competitive federalism and then the monitoring aspect. Okay. So now we're moving to the a small segment and we'll end this discussion. Service sector. Service sector, I have already told you, contributes the maximum in terms of GDP and absorbs less labor force. So that is the irony in case of our country. So if you see the share of service sector in terms of GDP or in terms of the size of the economy, then it is around 55%. It was in 2019-20 and it simply reduced marginally to 53% in 2021-22, and this is due to pandemic only, nothing much. This marginally reduction due to pandemic, but if you see the last month data, again this service sector has bounced back and again the share in terms of GDP has increased because of this normalcy have come off or came back again. Now why this simply reduction in the service sector due to pandemic? Because those non-contact services, let's say information, non-contact services, information, communication, business services, they were remain resilient, but those contact services like let's say tourism sector, retail trade due to this lockdown, hotel business, these were mostly affected or badly affected we can say. So job, in terms of job also these sectors were badly affected. So that's why this is the marginal decline in case of service sector we saw. If you see in terms of FDI also, foreign direct investment, then FDI inflows to service sector, then it is the largest recipient sector in our country in terms of FDI, largest recipient. One data like World Investment Report 2021, which is generally published by UNCTAD, it says that India was the 5th largest recipient of FDI in 2020, 5th largest. 5th largest recipient of FDI in 2020. Okay. So why this marginal decline? Because of this decline in the contact services, non-contact, no contact services were intact, and now it has been again bounced back, and it is the largest recipient of this FDI in terms of among these all these three sectors. Okay. So I think we have discussed let me show you the topics which I highlighted on my first. Yes, different dimensions we discussed: growth, development, employment. We discussed inclusive growth and issues arising out of it or issues from it. What is inclusive growth? We discussed inclusive development, feature of inclusive growth, then impact we discussed, how we can achieve that, challenges, and then growth inequality also we discussed. Then we discussed this jobless growth, service sector we also discussed in case of mobilization of services, mobilization of resources, we discussed saving and investment. And then issues with the planning, that also we discussed with respect to planning. In terms of planning, we saw what are the objectives, what were the achievements, and what were the failures or drawbacks or a negative of planning. And then we saw this difference between Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. That's it from my side in today's discussion, and it was the whole holistic coverage of the first unit, that includes your planning, your growth and development, inclusive growth and all. From tomorrow we'll start this new topic, agriculture, and if you have any query, any doubt, you can ask. Pulkit, yes, you can use in your answer this global hunger index statistics. There is no harm. Any other doubt or any query, so that we can discuss, and then we'll end of this session. I think I have highlighted enough points for your answer, and OTOP also will provide, that is one topic, one page. Through that also will provide you some more information, more stuff regarding this. You can use that also in your answer. So you can simply rely on these two sources. One is class and another one is OTOP. Okay, so if you do not have any doubt or any query, so let's end this class here, and tomorrow we'll start this new topic, agriculture. Thank you very much.